Men have called me mad, but the question is not yet settled whether madness is or is not the loftiest intelligence. Does anyone remember the mad genius Edgar Allan Poe? I became interested in Poe when I was studying some of his works in my English literature class that I took in college last year. I had to study many of his stories, including The Telltale Heart, and it was interesting because most of the students in the class were getting different things from each story, and it was a lot of arguing and a lot of laying out every single line of every single story and just really picking apart Poe's words. And that was really cool to me that he left such an impression that anyone can pick up one of his stories and get something different out of it. And it's just really a matter of how the mind perceives them. And to me, that's just really an art form, and he just really nailed it. And I just really admire his works, and I will be shedding some light on one of our darkest writers in history. You will be learning about one of the most famous poets in the world. His background, he didn't necessarily have a rough childhood. His mother passed away when he was 2 years old, and he was adopted into a new family, and he was able to live a pretty good childhood. He didn't have any shortage of money or anything like that, and he had it pretty good as compared to most children around that time. And he was able to attend school in England for 5 years, and he ended up going to school in America and eventually attended the University of Virginia at age 17, where he was kind of above college during that time. He was really intelligent, and he didn't really know how to channel that towards his classes, so he became a bit of a drunk, and he ended up dropping out of college and joining the military at age 18, where he became a sergeant major in 2 years. And he eventually attended West Point Academy, and he didn't do so well and got dismissed from the Army at that point. He was very unsuccessful during certain times in his life, and then he was very successful in other times. He had a few jobs here and there writing for newspapers, and he didn't necessarily get fired from those, but he just didn't have the best of luck with keeping a job. They would either go under, or they just weren't selling enough copies. They weren't really getting the popularity needed to maintain a newspaper at that time. And he became an editor at one point and just didn't really keep jobs that easy, and he wasn't making a living off of his published works at that time, and he published multiple different short stories and poems that didn't necessarily become popular until later on, after his passing, and he just really wasn't good at doing life. He really, the only thing he was necessarily good at was writing. So some of his most successful pieces are The Gold Bug, which is essentially about two friends that go on a treasure hunt, and he actually describes how to decode encrypted messages in this story, and that just speaks to his intelligence. He was a very intelligent person, very dark, but very smart. The Raven shows sort of his hopeless romantic side. It tells about a young student who was trying to study, and he was being driven mad by his grief over his lost lover, Lenore. He had a raven visit him, and it kind of represented the darkness that was inside of him, and he was just slowly going bad over the course of the story. Another one of his famous works is The Telltale Heart, and it's among the most known, and it's essentially Poe's version of the perfect plan of killing a man and how it drives him mad. He sort of goes into dismembering him, putting him in the floorboard, and the police come, and it's a whole big thing on how it affects him and how it essentially drives him mad. And there's a lot of depictions of that story, and it can mean a lot of different things. So these are just a couple of his famous works. If you get time, make sure and go give them a read and really dig in, and they all speak to his character and how he perceived things and how he was a little bit on the crazy side, but definitely above his time as far as his writing goes. He lived a very short life, and he died at age 40, and he just became more famous as the years went on after his passing. He is one of the world's most known poets and short story writers. He has really inspired a lot of other authors and writers who do horror stories and things like that, and even just taking some of his vocabulary is helpful to anyone because he had such a broad vocabulary. He was, like I said, he was more famous after he passed away, and he just couldn't get the right amount of money when he was living, and he just really didn't make it off of his works. Unfortunately, he didn't live the best life, but he left an amazing legacy, and he was known for his horror and darkness, and I just don't think that the people of his time were necessarily ready, such as our society today, for that type of writing. And so today I spoke to you about Edgar Allan Poe's entire life, from beginning to end, and his childhood, and some of his most famous works that came out of his experiences and his dark mind that made him become so famous today. And I hope you have a better understanding of Poe and how he lived, and thank you for listening.